right. We are live. Welcome, welcome to those of you who are joining us. We're a couple minutes early just to give folks time to jump on. So thanks for tuning in and being on top of things. Looks like we've already got about 18 on Facebook, and we're also streaming concurrently on YouTube as well. So kind of a new setup on our end, and we're hoping that you can hear us and that there's no technological issues. But if there is, drop a comment in the box below so we can figure it out. Right, well, I don't see any issues. Jenny, good evening. Tommy's watching. If you're here with us, drop a comment in the below. Let us know where you're from, what you're hoping to get out of tonight, what's going on. It is Friday, so maybe you've got some fun weekend plans despite the COVID-19 quarantine. We were just talking here, South Dakota, the bars are open. Where are you at, Corbett?
I'm in Oklahoma City.
You're in Oklahoma City. Bars are open. Bars are not open here in Washington, D.C. So pour one out for Leah tonight. She will not be able to go out. All right. Everyone's filtering in. Why do the guys have hats and not the girls? Great question, Gretchen. Just didn't feel quite the need to wear one tonight, but I can next time. I certainly can next time. And thank you, Eric, on YouTube for letting us know the audio is good. And that is going to be a critical part of tonight. So it's looking good. We're sounding good. You guys are tuning in. Thank you. Thank you. Let's see. We've got Oklahoma, North Dakota, Stowell, Texas. And oh, we got the President Miller and the Mantiply crew in Virginia watching. Montana tuning in. California. Wow. Lots of states here tonight.
What do you pay Jim Felton to give you all them compliments, Corbett?
You don't want to know. We have a strange relationship, very complicated.
Goodness. All right. We got Kansas, Jordan, Montana. Somebody just put 3014, so that's great. Thank you, Richard Wilson. We'll definitely be talking about that. Oh, North Dakota Theater Flash gang member, and they put up a little horn sign. So Thomasville, Georgia. Wow, that might be as far east as we've got. Oh wait, Pennsylvania. Okay, okay.
I used to live in Thomasville, Georgia.
Really? There you go. Home state pride. All right. Well, I think we've got our crew here tonight. Thank you guys for tuning in. I appreciate you being patient with us as we work through streaming on both YouTube and Facebook. So very exciting. We are here tonight for a facts only Friday. We started this because there's certainly a lot of myths to be busted out there and a lot of truths that need to come out. So we figured what better way to do it than kind of attack it from a live stream perspective. So very excited to be here tonight with USCA Vice President Justin Tupper. He's calling in from St. Ange, South Dakota, and you guys had a sale today, right? So you've got the crew wrapping up in the background there.
You got it.
And then, of course, our very special guest, Mr. Corbett Wall, Feeder Flash Gang crew leader. Is that what it would be? So thank you. And coming in from Oklahoma City. So we've got two of the best here for all of your marketing competition questions tonight. And we hope to be live for about an hour. So we've got plenty of time here tonight. And with that, you know, I think we've got quite a few folks in. We've been live for about 5 minutes, so folks are all tuned in, and I think we'll turn it over now to Mr. Vice President Justin Tupper for kind of an update, just in general, what's been going on with this 3014 proposal for folks who didn't tune in last week, and just a broad 30-foot overview, and we'll kind of get microscopic as we go in.
Sure, glad to. 30 and 14 is something that I think Corbett has alluded to several times. We were at a USCA meeting in Billings, Montana, having some discussions, very in-depth discussions, I might add, about what was going on with the cattle market and what are some of the things that we could possibly do. And needing to get more negotiated cash was a topic that came up. And so we sat around and discussed ways that we could possibly do that. And out of that and a lot of other discussions and phone calls, a minimum of 30% of the negotiated sales of all cattle in plants, every plant that has to report to MPR, mandatory price reporting, 30% would be bought in the spot cash market and delivered within 14 days. And a couple of, I'll just hit a couple of questions that I know we get all the time is why 30? And one of the reasons is when you come up north, Nebraska, Iowa, the negotiated cash sales on average is probably at least that or higher. But as you go down south, and Corbett will be able to allude a lot more to it, we're nowhere near that 30%. And when you would bring that total together, along with the fact that those plants probably would buy more than 30% so they don't get a fine, that's going to be part of the ask that we have. We could get that negotiated cash sale up there pretty good, and we can have a robust market and be able to tell what that cash market is supposed to be like. So that's a big overview, but that's kind of where we got started.
Absolutely. Corbett, any more color to add to that?
Well, if we go a little deeper talking about why we arrived at 30, and not that we disagree with more than that, we'd love to get more than that, but we're saying 30% minimum. That's our floor, not our ceiling. We would love to negotiate for more than that. But, frankly, our big corporate feeders that are in formula deals with these packers, and they have been for a long time, and some of them have actually purchased their feeding facilities from packers. And that came with the understanding that those packers would get those cattle. And those are formula purchases. They make up more than half. So if they make up more than half, it's going to be a little bit hard for us to get half of the volume. And so we just figured that was going to be a little bit too much to ask. And at 30, it would be a little bit hard for the packers to resist. That's not much of an argument to say we shouldn't have to negotiate for less than a third of the cattle that we buy. That seems like kind of a weak argument. So it seems like something we could get. We're hoping that if we can get the 30 minimum, maybe at some time we can negotiate for more than that. Put that out as a goal. But I also think that 30 is enough. We think that that's enough. 30 gives your big corporate feeders, which there's nothing wrong with them doing what they're doing. Just because they're a corporation doesn't mean they shouldn't be able to do business with the individuals there, but it gives them room to live. It gives your guys that are on some kind of a branded program, or some guys that feed the kind of cattle that they want to grid those cattle. It gives those guys room, and then it gives enough room for a real robust, competitive cash market. And I tell you what, it would just it would do my heart good to see a cash selling feedlot, to get a packer buyer to come buy his lot early or midweek, look at his cattle, bid him, and leave, and he wouldn't have to think that was the end of the relationship for the week. We're at the day and time now, the cash sellers, if they get a bid, they better damn well take it, or they're not going to see those guys again for the rest of the week, and probably going to get punished next week and have to sit on those cattle for longer. But if we had a minimum 30% negotiated cash, your packers would be seeking out people that wanted to sell cash. Their orders would fill your fed cattle auctions in the Midwest where they have those cattle. And I'm an auction guy. I know Justin is. uh, that's the best place to find price discovery. And we still have fed cattle auctions, some of them with pretty good size. And your packer buyers would be in there. That helps set the market on the cash side. They would get on the online fed cattle exchange and try to buy some cattle, and they would seek out customers in the custom feedlots, and they would seek out independent feed yards that want to sell cattle cash, and they would get out and try to buy those cattle to fill their requirements. And I think that's the best way for us to find the price. And it's apparent that we've got a serious problem right here. We're not getting near what we ought to get, and frankly, you can't blame somebody for trying to buy something as cheap as they can possibly buy it. I think all of us like to do that, but it's our problem. It's the cattle people's problem. They need to fix it, and that's what we're trying to do here.
Absolutely. And we've got 4,380 of those cattle people signed on in support of this proposal. And we've been, gathering those signatures. So thank you all for signing on. And just a bit on what we're doing with some of those signatures. We're not sharing that information publicly anywhere, but what we're doing is we're taking those hard numbers and bringing them up to Capitol Hill and saying, these are real constituents in your district who want to see this happen. And it's been really resonating with folks on Capitol Hill because we're actually seeing a push for something. But of course, there are folks who are pushing back against the proposal. And we saw some press earlier this week that really showed us what we're up against. And I'm going to kind of flip a coin here. I don't know who wants to tackle this one, this pushback that we're seeing. I don't know if it's Corbett or Justin, so I'll I'll point to them because and I laugh, but it's serious. It really showed us what we're up against this week in terms of this proposal.
Well, I'll try it for a second, and then I'll refer to my buddy Corbett. But we know we're up against a tough hill. And again, he said everything in it. We talked to Corbett when we had some of those calls when we were preparing. We had Florida, Alabama, North Dakota, South Dakota, Texas, Oklahoma, all across, and we had a broad section of producers and industry people. And one of the things that we talk about all the time at USCA is we got to get a win. We have to get a win. So we would love to see 52, just what Corbett said. I'd love to see 52, but we got to get a win. And if it's not achievable, there's no sense of going out there and pie in the sky. We've got to get a win. So that's why we set the 30 minimum. We know that there's going to be big opposition to that because it's changing the status quo. Corbett touched on it a little bit, but it's going to be some more. It's a definite big change in the South. And I've had a lot of people up in my part of the world. Well, we already sell 30. I said, yes, we understand that. We think that'll get more robust as Corbett and his area down there. There's plants down Corbett's way, and he can talk more to it in a second, that maybe have almost zero negotiated cash trade. And if we can get those up to 30 so that there's buyers out there that have to compete on a daily basis, we see it in the auctions every day. That's where competition is, and that's what we want the packer to do. The leverage pendulum has to swing back to the producer. Right now, they've got all that leverage. We'll talk about it here in a little bit, but I think I said it on my radio, and I know Corbett does every day, new record highs in the box beef. So we've got to get that leverage pendulum at least moved back to the producer somehow. So I'll pitch it over to my buddy Corbett for some finish on that.
Well, Justin, you're right there. We got to get a win. And I've probably been stuck on 30 more than anybody, but I'm comfortable at 30. I think it's enough. And I feel comfortable because we've got people on both sides equally pissed off at us. Your guys in the North are so, that, my gosh, why would we settle for 30? Iowa's at 50 right now. We realize that. You've got premium quality cattle in Iowa, and you've got a lot of fat cattle auctions in Iowa. There's going to be packers that come from other areas in there trying to fulfill their requirement. The requirement isn't per the Iowa area, it's per plant. And we've got a lot of plants that haven't gotten near 30% of their volume buying, and they'll be coming into those areas to buy. This first quarter of this year, Nebraska was just over 30. They're going to sell more, but we've got Texas at 7%. And that's up from where they were in 2015. Your Texas feedlots sold less than 2.5% of their cattle cash. And if that doesn't scare you, it really should. But the guys that I talked to at the Texas feedlots, and I haven't talked to them, but I think it's their stance, Texas Cattle Feeders Association, they think this is the craziest thing in the world. That they like where they're at right now. But frankly, those big feedlots down there, and I've said it several times on my program, and if you guys have missed that, these big cattle feeding operations, the big commercial cattle feeding operations, don't care what the market is. It's irrelevant to them. Interest is cheap. They put out orders to buy feeder cattle that will hedge. If those cattle will hedge, they will buy them. If they will not hedge, they won't buy them. They'll hedge those feeder cattle, they'll put them in their lot, and they'll charge those cattle yardage and feed. And that's how they make their money, is by running that feedlot, charging yardage and feed to those cattle. So those cattle are paying the feedlot's way. Then whenever those cattle are ripe and they go on the show list, likely they're going to have a $3, $4, $5, $6, $8 basis between what the board is and what the cash cattle market is, and they've been enjoying really good bases. So they jump at the basis whenever they sell, which limits any kind of opportunity you have in the cash market to gain $1, and they don't really care. They don't really care what the feeder cattle are costing. They don't really care what the fat cattle are bringing. It's all about the paper trade and the basis, which that's fine. It works for them, but these people that grow these cattle, these backgrounders, these people that produce these calves, they've got to have real money to buy things with. And it's not working for them. And we're going to continue to lose demand in the feeder cattle. I guess we can just give up on the fat cattle deal and not have any demand in it at all. That's not the part of it that I really love. It's your feeder cattle demand. And you'll talk to all kinds of guys that are frustrated with the way things are. They say, as long as we continue to buy feeder cattle in a competitive market and sell fat cattle in a non-competitive market, this deal doesn't work. Well, it's going to threaten your feeder cattle demand and competition at some point when you have fewer and fewer people that want to feed cattle. And then whenever you don't have any demand at the feeder cattle level, then you've got guys raising calves that can't get a decent price for the calves. They're going to go broke. They're going to sell out to bigger places. And then eventually your ranch communities will fail because they have to have people living on those ranches and working them, not outside ownership and just sending some cowboys out there to check and gather once in a while. But this goes a lot deeper than just the surface.
All right. No, great. And let's pause there and take a question, because we have a question here on YouTube from Robert Frucetta, who asked, how would you define a negotiated cash deal? And I've had this come up more than once, so we'll start there. What is a negotiated cash deal? We'll start at the top.
The definition of a negotiated cash deal is where both sides have some say in what the price is. It's a negotiation, and it doesn't hinge on any other thing that's happening out there. The ending price doesn't hinge on something that's yet to be decided. Your formulas are all based off of mostly last week's market, whether that's a high of the week or the weighted average or what have you. Your grid prices are based on how the cattle finish. But a negotiated cash price, both sides get to have a say in what's happening, and it's final right there. You're done. Whether you sell those cattle dressed or live, there's no other variable that affects the price. And that's where you find price discovery right there.
And a couple other additions to that is, Corbett, that we've talked about. I've had this question many times about, so will they be able to throw in Holsteins or lower quality cattle to pick up that 30%? And the answer to that is no. In what will be the 30% in negotiated will be And I know that you say commodity cattle, and I don't know what the right term would be, but the Holsteins, the Longhorn crosses, those would not be fitted into this same 30% spot average for each plant. They're marketed in a separate, their own place, and they have to be listed as such. And Corbett, you probably have a little more that you can add to that.
Right. We don't have to worry about the definitions, Justin, and those of you that are listening. It's already done for us through mandatory price reporting. And that's where this will be monitored eventually, and that's where it will be enforced, is through that. And they've already got hard definitions for negotiated sales. These packers have to turn in all their purchase information twice a day, every business day. They have to turn in all of it already. That was pushed forth 20 years ago with mandatory price reporting. So that's already in. Whenever that data comes in, when that purchase information comes into USDA, it automatically gets put in baskets: a negotiated cash, a negotiated grid, a formula, or a contract. And it's already put in there. And it's going to be very easy for them to monitor how much volume, because it's going to be volume per plant. It's not per area or per state or anything like that. And one thing that Justin always reminds us is the onus is on the packer. It's not on you guys. You feedlot guys can still do business the way you want to do it. It's just going to give you negotiated cash as an option. And when you've got packers coming to you wanting to give you a cash price for cattle, or you custom cattle feeders, they're wanting to give your customers a price for cash cattle. How long's it been since you've had that? A long time. And I think people will really like it. And if we can get this deal pushed through, it will save the industry. I truly believe it.
Absolutely. Along that same line on YouTube, we've got North Florida Cowhand asking, what's the deadline to get this done by?
I'll trip on that for a second. So what we're going to hang it on is a reauthorization of mandatory price reporting. There will be several ways that happens, but it'll eventually be through the Senate Ag Committee, is to the best of my knowledge. And the way that'll happen is these senators, and that's one thing I want to talk about when we talk about 50 or 30%. It's not going to be Corbitt Wall or myself or Leah negotiating a 50 or 30. This is going to be done by your senators in the Senate Ag Committee, how they propose this and how it's sent through. And that's where US Cattlemen comes in. They're going to do a lot of the work, working the Hill and getting these people informed. And Leah does a great job of that. Our whole crew there does. But again, so when people talk about you got to negotiate, well, that's all fine and good. Corbett and I are sale barn guys. We know what the negotiating a sale is, but it isn't going to be like that. We have to inform the legislators and the Senate Ag Committee, and they've got to be able to take that, and then they've got to go within their caucus and outside, the Democrats and Republicans, and find a way to compromise. Something that's not always easily done, as we know in Washington, D.C., to push it forward. So the long-winded answer to that was it's going to go through the Senate Ag Committee, through mandatory price reporting, and I do love the fact that there's no more. We've seen exactly all of this is in place for USDA to be able to watch and monitor this 30%. It's already there. All they got to do is click the button and they'll know whether they got their 30%. And again, a beautiful part to me is if the fines are where we want them to be, and again, that's negotiated through the Senate Ag Committee, they're never going to stop at 30%. They're going to make sure they bought enough cattle so they don't get fined for not having their 30% done. One more thing I'll touch on, and I'll pitch it to Corbett a little bit about this. A question I get asked all the time is, we don't want big government. We don't want government telling us how to do it. Well, I don't either. But right now, there is no other solution. If negotiated cash goes the way it has been, we'll be just like the hogs. And again, if you've listened to Corbett tell his story, he does a great job of telling that story. But we've got to have it. There's no other way right now. If we don't mandate at least a percentage, okay, and we're not asking for the world. That's what Corbett has said. That's what we've said. If it ends up at 30%, we let all these people that like to sell a different way than that live. They can do that. But we need that cash sale so we know what the cash market is. That 5-state weighted average, instead of being $1.10 or $1.05, whatever it is this week, we think we can move that needle. It can be 2 or 3 higher. and then think what some of your grids and if your base price is 2 or 3 higher to start with. And again, we know the packers will change. They're going to make different rules when this gets implemented, but we've got to start somewhere, and that's where we're at. If you've got any more on that, Corbett?
Well, my favorite part about this fight, and I think you got to pick your battles. You know, we've talked about that. I don't want to get on something that we have to chip at for years and years and wear everybody out on. We're going to know whether we won or lost in September. This is going to end in September. If we can't get it, we can't get it. And you know, we'll say we give it our best try. So we've got this spring and summer to push this, because reauthorization of mandatory price reporting is going to happen in September. And this is where we want this to be attached. And whether we build legislation and attach it to it, or how we do it, you know, I'm not a politico. I don't know how that works, but I do know that we're going to know whether we won or lost by September. And it's going to give you guys right here, while the irons are hot and everybody's mad, we can get something done. And the timing is absolutely perfect for getting this done. And you guys, you know, I know a lot of you are kind of lax in calling your representatives and your senators and trying to get something done, but we absolutely have to get something done, and the timing is perfect, and it could never be better than right now. And let's get it done.
Couldn't say that better myself. Yes, call your members of Congress. That's going to help tremendously. We do have a deadline, September. We either get it done or we don't. Along that line, we have a question going back to YouTube here. Eric Tanner on YouTube asks, who are the lobbyists against this? And we don't have to say names, but maybe we can kind of allude to who might be against this proposal and what we're up against. Maybe touch on the letter that came out earlier this week from Dr. Kuntz out of Colorado State University, kind of pushing back against this proposal and giving us a glimpse of what kind of opposition we've got ahead of us.
Me? Well, I mean, we don't have to tiptoe around it, do we?
No.
NCBA put out a press release this past week, and I have been guilty of using Dr. Stephen Kuntz's analysis, research, and published paper as an argument for this. And their press release from NCBA did not say whether they were for or against this, but it was a letter that was published by Dr. Kuntz, which NCBA funded the research. But it's an academia paper that's been published, and it's on the internet, and you can look at it and you can see his presentations on it. And the presentation he did asks for more negotiated cash trade, or it says if we want to have price discovery, we've got to have cash trade. And he noted in his research 2 spots in there, basically at 0 price discovery, or where it comes off of 0, where you start seeing some sign of a little bit of a hint of price discovery. That's about where we're at right now. The point at which he said there was robust price discovery is working towards 30%. Now, I have used that. Now, in his letter, he said that the analysis he did and the research did not argue for a mandated minimum cash trade, and that's fine. I respect the work that he's done, and I thought it was great work. Now, if we weren't supposed to use it in this manner, I mean, I'm sorry, but it was out there, and I trusted the work that he did and the research that he had done, and it sure seemed logical to me. But the letter said that was his work was not an argument for mandated minimum cash trade, and that he did not support that. Well, that's his point of view, and this is ours.
That's Facts Only Friday, folks. Tupper, anything else to add?
No, I think exactly that. I think if you read through it and you actually read it, it asks that we need more negotiated cash trade to get a robust negotiated cash sale. And that's exactly what we're saying. And any time that you have to negotiate, that's something that I think we need to talk about just a little, Corbett, is that when you got a negotiator, it goes back and forth. That's when we think, especially us sale barn guys, that's when we think you're going to get a higher price if you have a chance to negotiate. Right now, how many guys, I've seen it on our questions, have said, we get a bid and that's it. Corbett alluded to it earlier. We want people there that have to bid on them. We would love it if one of those packing houses down the road, he doesn't have his 30% bought and he goes to Corbett's house because he's been a negotiated cash seller and he's got to give him $2 or $3 extra bucks because he's got to get that 30% in for that week. Those are things that we believe could happen with this, and at least get them out looking at your cattle, making sure they know. But also those guys, like he said, that want to sell the formula, there's plenty of room in there to get that done. I just think when we say a 30 minimum, and again, if we get more, I've saw that on there a lot of times, you got to start higher. Well, if it was a normal negotiation between me and Corbett, I would start higher. I'd make him buy a 12-pack and not a 6-pack, but that's just the way it is. It's not going to be that way, and it is Congress. And so we've got to educate the congressional staff, and that's where it starts, and that's where I think USCA comes in. And we're going to reach out to other groups to help us with this. It's not going to be USCA and Corbett Walls, Feeder Flash Gang. We're reaching out all across, and that's what cattle producers right now have got to do. Forget about every one of these associations that you're stuck on being affiliated with. And if it's something you believe in, get behind it, back the thing. Let's get it done. We have to get wins. We can't be a talking point. We've got to get wins, and I think this is a great way to do it. I know a lot of people said we wouldn't get this far, and I've got to give credit to Corbett and his Feeder Flash Gang. He has hung it out there for this deal and done a great job promoting it, and that's why it's gotten a lot of the light that it has, and we're thankful for that. And we're glad for the people that get to see it, and we're going to carry this thing to the end, and we're going to get a win. We're going to make sure we get a win. That's what we got to do.
All right, and we're at the halfway point here. I just want to check back in because we have over 300 folks watching us live between Facebook and YouTube. If you joined what we just started, thank you for tuning in. And if you've got any questions, comments, drop them in the comment box. If we don't get to them live here tonight, we'll make sure to go into the comments and answer all your questions later this evening. One of the questions that keeps coming up a few different times, I'm going to our Facebook comments now. Kenny McCurlick asks, can you give us an example of what Senate aides and congressional aides would like to hear in the calls to Congress? So what does calling your Congress look like? Similarly, I had another question pop up here too. That just asked what Josh Morris on Facebook asked, what's the simplest way to explain how 3014 will impact cow-calf guys that market at the local sale barn? So both of those questions I think can kind of be combined. What is the simplest way? You're calling your member of Congress, you're talking about it at the sale barn. Give me maybe 2 or 3 sentences that folks can concentrate on this proposal.
Well, I always talk more than that, but I'll try, Leah. And then I'm going to throw it back on you, what they want to hear, because that's kind of where your department lands. You know what they want to hear, but how it'll help the cow-calf guy is very simple. When the feeder guy, and I don't care if he's a stalker, he's a feeder, or he finishes, if he makes money, he comes back to my auction or he goes to DV auction with Corbett Wall and he spends more money on those feeder cattle. It's plain and simple. And we've said it millions of times. If you put money in the cowboy's hand, he'll spend it. And so it's easy to see if we can get those guys making money, unlike our friends at the big packing houses. And we've already, they're going to back over our truck anyway, aren't they, Corbett? So those big 4 packers who are absolutely raking it in that we're going to get to later, they're not going to share. But the guys that feed your cattle, if they make money, they're coming back. And especially Corbett can tell you, he looks at Feeder Flash every day, and all those sales, the high quality sales, those guys come back a time and time again. If we can keep them making money, that's simple. It's going to come back to the cow-calf guy. They're going to get more money in your pocket.
Yeah, it's competition. And I think that's all you need to tell your representatives when you call them is tell them that we need more competition in the cattle market at your Fed level there. But you know, these packers the last couple of weeks are making in excess of $2,000 a head, not selling them for that, making that a profit of over $2,000 a head, doubling, more than doubling their money on a lot of these cattle that they're buying. And do you think that's going to make them more aggressive for fat cattle next week? No. And the truth probably is they're not in a big hurry to get this log jam of fat cattle worked through those processing plants because they know they're going to get them all eventually. And they're just so disciplined to sit back and let everything come to them. They're holding all the cards. And we've got to try to manage this thing at some point. We've talked about on my talks, if you've ever seen it, I talk about Teddy Roosevelt in the very early 1900s. He broke up the meat trust, the beef trust, and it was a monopoly of your packing plants. And if you read these old books, they're back in the 1800s and early 1900s about the problems that we've had with packing plants in this country on a free market system is they tend to gang up and they want to monopolize. Well, Teddy Roosevelt broke that up because he saw that there was 6 packers that controlled 50% of the business. Now we've got 4 controlling 85% of the business. It's time to come in and do something. And I know we don't like to have to rely on the government to come in and help us. But a lot of you guys that are saying that are also going to cash any kind of subsidy check that you might get too. But most of us, kind of pull the hat down when we decide to do that. You're not proud about it. We don't want to get to be like the row crop industry where government subsidies become a part of your ag business plan. When you've got to that point, you've pretty much lost straight up competition. But we want to be able to fix this industry ourselves and get these markets to working like they're supposed to. But when you don't have any competition at the top level, it starts to make the rest of you suffer down below. And the easiest way I can say it is, it's a whole lot easier to get 4 heads together than it is 4,000. And you guys know what I'm saying here as far as collusion, price fixing, manipulation of the markets and things like that. Justin knows what he's up against if he's only got 1 cow buyer sitting in the seats on sale day and he's got a pretty good slug of cows back there. Somebody's going to have to keep him honest, and it's probably going to have to be Justin. And I don't think Justin has a cow plant. It's going to be kind of tough. But if he comes in there and he gets 3 or 4 guys with cow orders showing up and then maybe a trader or 2 in there to mix it up with them, you got a pretty good market. And it's as simple as that. That's what we got to get is more competition.
Simple as that. And folks, there's never been a better time. We have the President of the United States, Donald Trump, ask the Department of Justice to investigate what's going on in the meatpacking industry right now. It is a politically hot issue. And so you've got to strike while it's hot. Call your members of Congress and just say that we need more competition in the marketplace. You don't have to get more into specifics or details. Tell them to call up the U.S. Cattlemen's Association for those. Just to call and say that something needs to be done and there needs to be more competition in the marketplace. They're required to tally up all of the phone calls, emails, letters that they get, according to issue and different portfolios. So your voice will be heard, your voice will be counted. And I tell you what, it makes our job a heck of a lot easier if we have those folks reaching out to us and asking how they can help instead of the other way around, instead of trying to convince them that their constituents care. So we've got the what, we've got the timeline, we've got the how and the why. Let's go now to what happens if nothing happens. And so we've got a few questions here on YouTube. Again, from Robert Fusetta, who says, how much will the fines be for a non-compliant packer? And will that fine be imposed weekly? And then we also have Kevin Smith on Facebook who says, They've been working on this in their Arkansas producer group, and they want to know what are the unintended consequences of this legislation. So what are the penalties for non-compliance, and what are some things that folks aren't thinking about? Are formula cattle going to trade higher? What are some of the maybe downfalls, or maybe there isn't any, but I'll let you two kind of sort out who wants to go first.
Well, I'll start this one out and let Justin finish up on it. But in my mind, the fines will be the same as they are for non-compliance of mandatory price reporting. And it could be up to $10,000 per episode. Let the USDA sort that out. They have their own branch in there called ARC, Audit, Review, and Compliance. They go into those big plants once a quarter. They check their books. They are not P&S agents. They're a little more hard-toned than that, but they will come in there. They'll run over those books and they'll see if they're not complying. And they normally come out with warnings, and the warnings are made public. So usually the shame and the bad press gets them to complying before any kind of a fine does. But that's already set, so it will be right. And we're using mandatory price reporting, which has already been used for 20 years. We're using that as the avenue to get this done, and it will be very important in monitoring this and enforcing this. So all be through NPR there. The downside to this, I hate to, but I'll go back to something that Dr. Kuntz said, saying that it could cost the industry millions and millions of dollars. Well, the only way that I can see that it would cost millions of dollars is there's going to be more cash trade happen. And if we don't get this done, formula trade will eventually take all of our trade. So what's the base price going to be? I don't understand where we're going to base something if we don't have any cash trade to base anything off of. What are we going to go to? So if we don't do anything, eventually all the cattle will be sold on a formula with no real base. And we've already just about got there because our base price is off a cash market with very, very little competition. So it has no leverage in the trade. And that's how come we lose dollars every time there's an opportunity, and we fail to gain any when the fundamentals are in our favor. How are we going to, people say, well, base it off the futures. How are we going to base it off the futures when the futures are so volatile? They can go up and down enough to take anybody's head off every single day. We've got to have something that's real. And I don't think the meat is the way to do it, because your packers set those prices. These box beef cutout values that have inflated to over $4.50 a pound, those aren't negotiated prices. Those are set prices. And then your retailers come in there and purchase whatever volume of that they can stand. And, they could just jack those prices up there and not have any volume. So how are we going to use that as a base? We've got to have negotiated cash trade to set a base for these formulas. So you're going to have, it may end up there's not as many cattle sold on a formula. Well, these guys that sell formula, they always like to talk about how they plus the market every week. The high for last week was 95, and my cattle, I put them on the formula and they come back and they bring 98. So I plus the market $3. Well, how about plussing a real market with some competition in it? And then you've really done something at that point. And I think the millions and millions of dollars that people are saying that this could cost the industry is just the premiums that the formula guys get. They could still sell formula if they want to, but they're going to be selling formula off of a base price that has a lot of weight to it. But your guys that are stuck, establishing the cash price every week, then you've got the rest of the industry riding their coattails, and it's not fair. And so these cash guys, and I've said from the very beginning, the reason it's tough, we say, how come the cash guys don't get together and say, by gosh, we're gonna ask for $1.20 next week, and we're not going to settle for any more? because by the time they got off that phone call, one of them has already texted his packer buyer and say, hey, I'll take $1.15. You know, that's just the way they are. The reason it won't work, because the last guys that are still selling cash are the hardest headed, most stubborn mules that we got out there in the cattle industry, and they're the mavericks, and God love them. But that the reason that we can't get their heads together is because they are the most stubborn bunch. They would have already fallen for some kind of a sweetheart deal with a packer if they weren't stubborn. But we need to put the onus on the packers, make them come out and buy some cattle in a competitive market, and let the guys do their work. You know, how many of you guys go out and buy a pickup and you just go out there and look at the sticker and write them a check? No, you go in there and sit down and you make the guy go back and talk to his manager at least 3 times before you finally give in. And that's kind of what we're talking about here.
Anything to add, Justin, to that?
No, I thought you did a great job of explaining it. You know, the one of the things that it's hard to compare, and I see a couple of questions coming across about that, to compare market things right now with this COVID-19. We should be killing 120,000 cattle. I don't know, Corbett will know the exact number, but it was 80,000 something. That was all we got through today. And that is, you know, I'll just touch on that while we're talking about it, a very difficult thing. We're backing some of these cattle up. I know we're going to talk a little bit about a set-aside program. I'll maybe even allude to it. We've got to get these plants open back up. And if we can't get the chain speed moving, we're going to kick that can down the road, and it's going to be more difficult to get through this time and later on down the summer. So, you know, I guess we can move on to that set-aside program that's being proposed. In a long story short, that the government is going to come in and pay these feeders to slow down these cattle or put them on a maintenance ration so we can get through these cattle. And I guess, I think Corbett and I talked about it for a couple of minutes. That's okay. And maybe it helps you get through a little bit. It gets you a little money to help keep those cattle going while the chain speed's down. But my thoughts would be a little different. My thoughts on that would be, if we would get a say or talk about it, that when we get the chain speed back and we start getting caught up in the, we're going to see, and Corbett will allude to this when he gets to answer, that we're going to see that box beef price come from the ceiling. It's just going to fall, and it's going to fall in a hurry. And when that happens, then we're going to have a glut of meat around, and then they're going to use that to buy cattle cheaper. My thoughts would be, instead of the government putting money to set it aside, let's try to get that chain speed ramped up, and then let the government come in and buy some product, which they've said they're going to in the USDA bailout bill, that they're going to come buy some product. Let's do it then. And they either put it in the, Corbett alluded to the school programs, they put it to the needy, we ship it across to some of these places that need it, but that's where they could really step in and help the market. And that's where I would rather see, instead of the set-aside program that they're thinking about, if we can get chain speeds up. Now that's an if, and Corbett can allude more to that than I can, but once that happens and we have a little bit more of a glut, because we're coming into our biggest fat cattle time in June and July, then I would like, my personal belief would be, instead of a set aside, we try to grind through them, and then the government could come in and buy some of that product and move it out to the places that need it. And I think that'd be money better spent than a set aside. That's just my first personal thoughts. That isn't a USCA thought. We've talked a little bit on our marketing committee. We'll talk a lot more about it next Tuesday, but I know Corbett has some thoughts on that, so I'll pitch it over to him.
Yeah, the set aside deal for a feedlot that's really backed up with heavy cattle, and they cannot get them scheduled. And this, we say that the 3014 wouldn't help with that, but if you had packers that were trying to fill their 30% minimum requirement, and they came and talked to you and you said, I got some bigs back here, that I've been stuck with quite a while, I'll sell them to you cash, and we'll figure out the discount right here, and I'm going to make my best deal. That would help. But if you got some big cattle that you can't get scheduled, maybe we'll be forced to go to a set aside deal. But in my thoughts, I've been pretty optimistic and disappointed every time through this COVID deal, because it's lasting longer than I thought it would. But Secretary Sonny Perdue thought a week or 10 days we might get these plants back going again. if we can get them going, I'd say within the next 3 weeks, close to where they were at before, we know that they can work through harvesting these cattle pretty fast, because last summer we lost a 6,500 head a day plant, and we upped the kill from there on through the rest of the summer and into the fall. So if we get these plants back going, we can work faster change speeds and work on Saturday if your packing plants want to. This deal has been playing into their hands pretty good, but with DOJ breathing down their neck, I think they're probably going to try to do whatever they can to make themselves in a positive light. So we would hope that. But I'm like Justin. I'm not going to say whether I'm necessarily for the set-aside deal. I like his idea of using that money, and we haven't even got the money appropriated yet, so we don't know if the money's going to be there. The estimate said it was going to cost more than 130 million, at the best case scenario for a set-aside program, moving into over 300 million. I don't know where that money's going to come from, but I think it could be better spent purchasing product, because like Justin said, we're gonna wake up one morning and go check the morning trade on the box beef, and when that balloon busts, which it will, your choice boxes will be down $90 one day, and then they're going to want to crater the cattle market because they've gotten used to making these huge profits. But maybe if the government did want to throw some money this way, maybe they could come in and buy some of that product up and kind of help take care of that problem there, and soothe these wild variables markets out. It's just way too volatile, and it's not healthy for anybody when it's that crazy.
Absolutely. Well, we're approaching the top of the hour here, and we've had a few questions come in not related to marketing and competition. And I just want to say, keep tuning in every Friday. We'll cover a new topic. Next week, we've got truth in labeling on tap. The week after that, we're going to touch local beef processing. I saw a lot of questions on imports tonight. So, look for a trade special edition of our Friday, Facts Only Friday. But we're going to keep going on this marketing and competition stream, and kind of some wrapping it down, some closing thoughts. Like I said, if you do have questions and you've posted them in the comments, we will get to them at some point. A few folks have asked, what's the bill? What's going on Capitol Hill? Justin alluded to it earlier. We're working, we'd like to do this through the mandatory price reporting reauthorization. And so we've had those conversations on Capitol Hill, and we're having those conversations on Capitol Hill. And we expect something to happen here very, very soon. So keep following us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We're not on Instagram, on YouTube, and become a member of USCA to get, the most up-to-date news alerts, because we're going to be talking about this every Tuesday morning at 7 a.m. Mountain. Our marketing and competition committee meets. And we've had that weekly standing call now because there's just so much happening in the wake of COVID-19. And so really encourage you all to head on over to uscattlemen.org and become a member so you can stay in the know. But what are we missing here, guys? There, some questions are coming in. We've got a lot of different folks wondering. Let's see, Jeff Coleman on YouTube has been commenting quite a bit. We'll take, he makes a good point here. How do we go from price takers to market makers? And I don't know, that sounds like a Corbitt wall phrase if I've ever heard one. So I think that's a good summary of what we discussed here today. But what else? What are the takeaways? What are the closing thoughts here? How can we leave folks with something, to go home with?
Go ahead,
Justin.
Well, I think the biggest thing, and a lot of people are asking, how do you make 30 and 14 and explain it? Really just break it down to that. 30 is a minimum in every plant. It's been around the hill enough now, and that's the beauty of U.S. Cattlemen Association. I'll get a nasty plug in for us here. We have staff there all the time doing the work. That's Leah is out there full time. Jess, our crew does a great job. That's how we're going to get to them, and those staff people. So they've already touched it with them, Leah and the crew out there. So if you call them from your state and you say you would like to see this 30 and 14, you believe in it. You believe that's going to swing the pendulum back to the producer level, put some competition back in the market. That's what 30 and 14 wants to do. It's not a be all fix all. We know that. We know that's not the only thing that's going to fix the market, but we really think this is something that can do wonders for swinging that leverage pendulum back into the producer side. And so anytime you call up there, I guarantee you it's been up a hot button enough. They've heard about it. We got all the other national organizations coming around not liking it so much. So that's good. We get some press that way. Corbett's been talking about it. 30 and 14, bring competition back, get the leverage meter back to the producer.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's why I'm conservative. I think most of us that are probably talking and watching on this are very conservative and wear that conservatism on their sleeve. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel here. We're not trying to change the way everybody's doing things. That's why we're at 30 and 14 instead of something that's unattainable. But we want the people to keep being able to sell cattle the way they want to sell them, to have room for them. But the guys that long for competition in the cash market, we want to help that. And the guys that want to have a base price to work with that has a little more meat to it, this is a way we think we can get it. And we think if we can get this, we want, it's the only way that I can think of. And there's a lot of things out there. There's M-Cool, I dare say that. There's more, dropping more regulations. There's a lot of things out there that are up right now. This is the only one that I believe where we can get a bigger percentage of that retail beef price. We set a record in 2018, cattle producers getting the smallest percentage of the retail beef price. We blew it away in 2019, and with this crisis here in 2020, it just skyrocket from there. They're charging $4.50 a pound for a box beef cutout. It's unbelievable. Making as much as $2,500 a head. We've got to get a percentage of that back, and we're not wanting to put the packers out of business either. They know what they can give for cattle. If they can't give that much, then don't buy them. But don't expect to fill all your hooks with formula cattle if you can't come out there and negotiate for some cash cattle too. But this is a fair proposal here. And like I said, if we're getting a lot of blowback whenever the rubber meets the road, as Leah talked about, as we go forward, and some of these senators that have a say whenever they have to make a decision, what leg are they going to stand on if they say we shouldn't have to negotiate for less than a third of the cattle that we buy? Is that their argument? That doesn't sound real whippy to me, but I think we got a really good chance of getting this done, and we hope you guys get excited about it, because I'm getting pretty excited about it too.
Well, hey, and along the same lines of, having this easy to understand explanation, Sam Frazier from Frontier Live Sale has just volunteered to post and make us a video. So thank you, Sam, in the comments there. We might take you up on that. Careful what you volunteer for. But thank you guys for joining, for tuning in tonight. It looks like at our max, we had, over 350 folks tuned in. So that's absolutely incredible. Thank you so much. Corbett, we've plugged USCA, but you run your own operation over there. Do you want to put in a plug for your feeder flash every day? Where can folks check out your information that you produce every single day?
You can get more of my opinionated crap every day. Talk about the market and talk about what I think about things in the cattle industry. Every day on the feeder flash, it's a video. You can find it on YouTube. I like to direct people to nationalbeefwire.com. There's a lot of market information on there, a lot of real-time feeder cattle quotes, and there's a spot there that says feeder flash. It takes you right to my videos, and even past videos. If you want to go back and check the market from days and weeks before, you can go that and check that. But or just search for Feeder Flash and you should be able to find a way to watch that.
And I'm laughing. You said that, and as soon as you said it, we've got a few comments that came through that just said Feeder Flash Gang. So it's a real movement, folks. If you enjoyed listening to Corbett here tonight, you can hear him every single day from the comfort of your own home. So thanks again for tuning in, and we'll catch you all on the next Facts Only Friday.
Thank you.